Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. So happy to see you all here with us. Thank you for joining me for the Bay School of San Francisco's Finishing Strong Application Workshop. My name is Amy Gonzales, and I am the Director of Admissions and Flexible Tuition here at Bay. And on behalf of our admissions team, thanks for spending part of your evening with us. Tonight, we are going to go over the application, both the parent application and the student application, and give you some hints and tips to hopefully make the experience much more enjoyable for all of you. So we're going to go ahead and jump into our agenda. Tonight, we'll go ahead and we'll talk about the parent guardian part 1 of the application, part 2, which is the student application. Then we'll do the student conversation piece, which is also known as the interview at other schools. I want to make sure that we talk about taking care of yourself during this experience. And then, of course, there will be an opportunity for you to ask your questions in the chat throughout our program. By the end of the night, I hope that we'll be able to cover these pieces when you log out and say goodbye to me. I want you to all to understand and know the parts and purpose of the application. I'd also like to make sure that you understand the intention of the essays. There's a reason why schools ask specific questions, and I want you to understand the reason behind those questions. I want to make sure that you feel confident about the student conversation and that you have the opportunity to ask your questions. By the end of the evening, you will feel encouraged and motivated, and I want to reassure you that all of you, parent, guardian, and student alike, you've got this. You can totally do this. And then, of course, I want to make sure that you understand the perspective and the role of the admissions committee as we review your application. So let's go ahead and just everyone take a deep breath and we'll jump right in. I'd like to start our conversation tonight with our mission and values. So here on the screen, you'll read that at the Bay School, we balance challenging academics and innovative thinking with a mindful approach to learning and life. Our goal at Bay is to see students unlock their individual and collective potential so they begin to realize their roles in a dynamic world. These are the goals for Bay students. They are intellectually curious, academically high achieving, collaborative, invested in community culture, excited for a transformational high school experience, and that the students can embrace both process and product. And I want to start our conversation with a mission in mind, because this is what the admissions committee will hold as they review both the parent and the student application. There are 5 pieces to the application. The first part will be the parent-guardian application, the student application, 3 letters of recommendation, your 7th grade transcript and narratives, and the first term of your 8th grade transcripts, and then, of course, the student conversation. These are the 5 pieces of the application that we will review tonight. So let's go ahead and let's start with the parent-guardian application. So my parent and guardian friends out there, take a deep breath. We've got this. You can do this. I'm going to walk you through it right now. So here is the purpose of the parent-guardian application, right? So let's start with the reasoning and the why. Parents and guardians are asked to complete a portion of the application for high school admissions. First and foremost, really easy, it is for the admissions offices to collect basic demographic information. For example, the email that we will use to contact you and your family, also the address, information about who lives in the home, mailing address. Also, we want to learn what the family knows and understands about the school, and to also learn about the family's expectations of the school. We want to make sure that what you are looking for in your students' high school experience is indeed what we offer to our students and families. And then lastly, the parent and guardian application is important to all high school admissions offices, but especially at Bay, because we want to know how your family envisions the partnership between all of you and us in your child's education. So this is why there is a parent guardian application component to the high school application. So, parents and guardians out there who have already started or have taken a look at their portion of the application, you're going to notice there's actually two pieces that make up the parent guardian application. The first piece I'd like to stop and pause and make sure you all understand is that the first piece is something that all high school admissions offices ask, right? So these are responses that all of us will read from you. The second part will be school specific. Okay, so the questions you have in front of you now, these responses will be reviewed again by all of the schools that you apply to on Ravenna. So required general statement here is to just write a statement of recommendation for your child. We'd like to know your perspective on the strengths and weaknesses of your student, and this insight is very valuable. You're the only one who can provide this perspective to those on the admissions committee. There is also an additional optional statement that you can provide, and this optional statement is an opportunity for you to share any information that will help us better know your student. This might include any health, learning differences, tutoring, accelerated programs, or family circumstances that we should be made aware of as we read about your student. Now, please again, remember these responses are reviewed by all schools. So, piece of advice here, be very careful not to write that you believe that your student would do well at at a specific school. Again, remember generalized responses because everyone will read what you write here. Now, the second part of the parent guardian application are the required school specific questions. Now, on the screen, you have the two Bay specific questions. These answers, these responses that you write, parents and guardians out there, these responses will only be viewed by those folks here at the Bay School on the review committee. All right, so these are only for the Bay School of San Francisco. So the first question here is, Bay's rigorous academic curriculum is designed to develop both a student's intellect and character through an intentionally creative and collaborative process. We encourage students to understand the why of an equation, a design project, or a thesis, and to acquire the skills and resilience to take ownership of their own learning. All right, so make sure you read that a few times so you understand what the prompt is asking for. Now, here's the actual question. How do you see your student participating in Bay's academic environment? So, piece of advice before you jump into the first response that we'll ask you for is to make sure you understand that first portion of the prompt, right? To understand our academic curriculum and our academic mission, which I'm sure you've learned a lot about this fall. And then the question there is, how do you see your student participating in this type of academic environment? And in the application on Ravenna, you'll see that we have put a link to the Bay curriculum guide. You'll also be able to find a link to our course catalog and various videos we have there to help support you as you share with us how do you see your student participating in our academic environment. So here's a piece of advice. For example, you all know that Bay's class sizes are small and that we are a progressive school that believes that our students are active participants in their learning experience. So if you give us a few stories or anecdotes about how you see and know that your student will participate in that type of learning environment, that would be the best type of examples to provide there. All right. The second prompt for parents and guardians is based on our precepts here at Bay. So, as you can read, the Bay School is founded on a series of aspirational statements or precepts that guide the principles of our multidisciplinary academic process and community-based school culture. Right? So make sure that you read that a couple of times to understand and prepare for the response. So the actual question, of course, is Is there a Bay precept or two that you feel your student particularly exemplifies? And if so, how? And in Ravenna, I'll go ahead and there is a link to our Bay precepts. What I would recommend is you read through all of those precepts and find one that makes you smile because it actually does remind you of your student. Choose that precept that really encompasses who your student is. It tells you about their heart, about their desires, about their wishes, and describes who they are. So choose one of those precepts and then tell us how and why your student exemplifies this specific precept. Okay, so look through the list of precepts, choose one that really speaks to your child, makes you smile because it reminds you of your students, and then go ahead and write about how your student already exemplifies this precept, how they live it out in their life, how they talk about it with you and family members and friends. And that would be one of the best responses you can provide. So here's some general advice, my parent and guardian friends, because I know this can feel daunting and overwhelming, right? I want you all to stop and pause and begin with the end in mind. What do you think is essential for the admissions committee to understand about your student that can only come from you, that can only come from your perspective? Use anecdotes. Please tell me stories. It's really important and really lets me learn more about your student, right? Use those stories and reflect upon and share maybe one or two academic or social experiences that have been impactful for your child. I think it's important to get feedback from a friend or partner after you write a few drafts to make sure that the message you want to convey is actually coming across in your application statements. I know that I had to write an application for my daughter, and when we went through the process of applying to middle school, and as a mom, I thought that I was sending a specific message, but after one of my friends reviewed it, they said it was great, but did it truly reflect hope or did it reflect a different message? So we really just want to make sure that someone else puts eyes on your love letter about your students. And then, of course, last but not least, just like with everything else, review the statement as if you were reading about someone else's child. So after you have someone else read your statements, your responses, take a few days, pause, take a break from all of it, and then review your statement as if you were reading about someone else's child. And as you read it, ask yourself, is this the message I want to share about my student? Okay. Okay, so having said all of that, you might still say, well, Amy, I still don't know where to start. Well, here are some brainstorming strategies, right? So again, let's go ahead and look back on Bay's mission and values. And then after you review Bay's mission and values, you can make a list of adjectives that describe your child when you are reading the list of values that we have here at Bay. And then as you're reading it and reflecting, think of stories that show evidence of those descriptors, right? When you review your statement, think about what is missing, right? What is missing? What's something that we should know about your student? And really just focus on a few qualities. A really good tip that I have to share, right? Because it can be really daunting when you have all of this pressure to tell someone about your child, when you're typing this up. Go ahead and look back on old report cards and feedback and narratives from teachers in the past. One, it'll make you smile. And two, it'll give you some good information that you can include in your statements that perhaps you have forgotten. Also consider what fits into the story that you'd like to tell and share about your child. And is there anything in your student's history that might need some explanation? So, for example, if you're a student in a family who has recently moved and you joined a new school, go ahead and tell us a little bit about that. Or if there were many changes in your student's history of educational institutions, go ahead and share. Whatever it is that you think we should know about that isn't truly recorded anywhere else in the application process, go ahead and share that in your portion with the admissions committee. All right, here are some other tips. Parents and guardians, it's okay to speak from your heart. It's okay to speak from your heart. Share what makes Bay School a place that you think your student can find a place to belong and to thrive. And really see this as an opportunity for deep reflection. It's wonderful, right? When we can talk about our students, our children, and share about them with others. And I really like to take this as an exercise to really appreciate the children you have raised and the young adults that they are becoming at this time. Another tip that a parent recently shared with me is that she wrote all of her responses first on a Google Doc and then copy pasted it, of course, into the Ravenna application, but then kept her responses. And so when her student graduated from high school, she was able to bring that up and they sat and they read it together. They laughed, they cried, but talk about just a wonderful gift to your child. So that's just another tip from one mom to all of you. Okay, so we finished the parent guardian portion of the application. We're going to go ahead and jump into the student application. So whether you are a ninth grade applicant or a transfer student applicant, the information I share can be useful to both groups. All right, so student friends, make sure you have something to write with, pad of paper, your laptop, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to go through those application questions and the pieces that you'll need to submit, and you'll feel real good and confident by the time we're done. All right, so first and foremost, let's start with the purpose, right? The why behind why you need to do an application to high school. The purpose of the student application for an admissions office is for us to understand and get to know you better. That's really what it's about. And in order to get to know you better, these are the things that we're looking for when we review your application. We're looking to understand your special interests, your personality, your passions, your skills and talents. We want to know more about your responsibilities, what you do both in and out of school. We want to know about you in more depth. We are also looking to learn about your unique perspectives, your experiences, your passions, and what you will bring to our school community. Many times we're also getting a sense of your personality in your responses. So be yourself as you are writing these responses to your different high schools. And we want to learn about how your students' interests and base cultures and precepts come together. Where is the alignment in that? And then, of course, students, we're assessing your writing skill level. So grammar, punctuation, all of that counts. So there are two Bay required short answer questions. All right. So on the screen in front of you, you're going to see two short answer questions that will be asked of you on Ravenna. The first one is about our precepts. So similar to what we ask of your parents and guardians. So as you can read, at Bay, our founders composed a guiding list of precepts to provide a framework for thoughtful and ethical choices to keep in mind as we go through our day. These precepts were not meant to be rules. Rather, they are aspirations that inform us to make choices that develop healthy relationships, both individually and in community. Choose one precept from the list that resonates with you. All right, so here's a tip. Definitely read this prompt a few times so that way you can understand what we're framing you up to respond to. All right, so we know that this is going to be about the precepts that you've all heard about, whether it was during one of your morning visits during open house. I'll provide a link in Ravenna to our list of precepts so it'll be easy for you to find. Now, here's the actual question. How do you demonstrate this precept in your life? So let's read that again. How do you demonstrate this precept in your life? So eighth graders and transfer students, you'll go ahead, you'll review the list of precepts, and just like I recommended to your parents and guardians, as you read the list of precepts that we have here at Bay, when you choose one that makes you smile, when you read one that totally tells and shares your values and how you like to live your life, that's probably the precept you want to write about, right? So go through the list of precepts, choose one that resonates with you. Now, when you do that, You'll only spend a couple of sentences, right? You'll tell me that this is the precept that resonates with you. But what I need you to do is to take that step further because this is what the admissions committee will look for. We want to know, what does it mean to you? Okay, so you chose, for example, you chose the precept about living with kindness and honesty. Great. What does this actually mean to you? What does it say to you? And then importantly, also, how do you live these values in your daily life, right? So choose the precept, first step, right? You'll spend a couple of sentences with that. And then you'll tell me, what does the precept mean to you? A few more sentences. And then again, the bulk of your response is about how do you live these values in your daily life? Okay. So that is the first question of the two required short answer questions for Bay. The second question, let's go through that now. The second question is, what have you learned from someone who has a different perspective or background than you? Now, I know that sometimes this question can throw students in for a loop because they become so focused on trying to find someone who is different from them. So here's an example that I've given to all of you that I think can help. Tell me about a conversation that you had with a parent, with one of your grandparents, a sibling, because even though you're in the same house, you're still two different people with different perspectives, right? Or even tell me about a conversation you had with a friend. So think about a conversation, right? So right now, let's all just take a moment and think about, who would you ask, right? Who would you consider reflecting on a conversation that you've had with, right? So just kind of stop and pause. Who would you think about, right? What's a conversation you've had with someone that maybe had a different perspective than you? So once you've had that example, right, in your head, we all have an example now. I want you to tell me not just about the conversation, but I want you to tell me why it is important and relevant in your life. So, for example, um, you may have had a conversation with a grandparent and they talk to you about how important it is to write a thank you note. Now, many young folks don't really understand or see the value in a handwritten thank you note, right? Um, but perhaps you had a conversation with your grandma, your grandpa, and they told you how important it was and what it really means, and how perhaps a thank you note isn't just about saying thank you for a gift, but it's acknowledging the thought and the kindness that the gift giver put into finding a gift perfect for you, right? So, how does that conversation, or how does a conversation like that perhaps change your perspective, right? How does it change your actions now as you think about thank you notes after you receive a gift, for example? Right? It could be about a conversation. Another example is it could be about a conversation that you may have had with a teacher or with your parent or guardian about being on time. I know that sometimes being on time, it can be a challenge for some people, and perhaps you've had a conversation with someone who tells you the importance of being on time, and perhaps they give you a different perspective that being on time isn't just about you. It's about demonstrating to someone else that you respect their time, right? You value their time. So those are just a couple examples of conversations that you may consider sharing with the admissions committee. Now, again, those are just examples. You've had many conversations in your life that have shaped who you are now and have impacted you in one way or another. So take a moment, think about that, and share with us. But with this question, students, I want to make sure that you really do focus on the why of the conversation. Why was it important and relevant in your life? So only spend a few sentences telling me about the conversation, but really spend the bulk of your response on the why it was important and relevant in your life. All right, so in addition to the two required short answers for Bay, we also have a required base statement. And for the required base statement, we're asking you to keep your response to 300 words or about 1,500 characters or less. Now, for those of you who have attended the morning visit here at Bay, all of you attended our morning meeting. Now, our morning meeting is the big assembly that happens in the great room 3 times a week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Do you remember that now? Okay, got it. So that is what morning meeting is. Now, the question here that we have for you is, if you were to address the Bay community at a morning meeting, as you have experienced yourselves, what would you speak about? What would you share? And why is this topic important to you? And then again, in Ravenna, I'll go ahead and put a link there so that you can find samples of previous morning meetings that our community has shared. So that'll get your memory going and give you some good ideas. Again, I want to make sure we emphasize tonight that the important part of this response is the why. Why is the topic important to you in sharing with our community? So, for example, those of you who attended Bay on Dia de los Muertos, you had the experience of hearing from Diego, one of our senior students. And Diego went in front of our community and shared about his abuela, his grandmother, who passed away. And he talked about his experience being very, very far from her. And it was during COVID when unfortunately she passed. In this share that Diego had with our community, with tears running down his face, he talked about the relationship he had with her, how it impacted him when he lost her, and how he's been able to move forward in his grief. Now, when I asked Diego why it was important for him to share this very personal story with all of us, he said it was because he wanted to share about a tradition in his culture. He wanted to be a model for students that you can be vulnerable and share your feelings with others. And three, he wanted to remember and acknowledge his grandmother on such an important day. So, when you are looking at this base statement, think of something about yourself you'd like to share, right? It can be a talent, it can be a skill. Just share about yourself. But again, I want you to tell me, why is this topic important to you, right? Why is it important for you to share this piece of yourself with all of us? Okay, we're almost done, students, I promise, with your portion of the application. Okay, so for this, you've got two essay questions. They're short essays, I promise. So two essay questions, but you're only going to choose one. So you're only going to choose one response, and you're going to limit it to about 500 words or 2,500 characters or less. So just one essay, you're going to choose one of these. So here we have, describe an interest, talent, or skill that makes you happy and brings you joy. One that you believe your application would be incomplete without sharing. So basically, this question is telling you to share with us what makes you you. That's all it's about. What is it about you? What is this talent, this skill, this interest that you have that really completes who you are, right? And brings you joy and happiness. So just take a moment to think about, what would you share with us about yourself that just really completes who you are as a person. And this is when you can actually tell us about it in your application. Now, the other option you have is to discuss an accomplishment, an event, or a realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or other people. An example of this would be to share about either a positive or even a negative experience that has shaped who you are today and how you think about life, your perspective. Okay, so don't feel limited when you're thinking about an accomplishment, event, or realization. I want you to think of something you might think it's really small, but it has impacted you so big. You can write about that and share that, because again, it also gives us insight to who you are, which is really the purpose of the student application. All right, I want to introduce you to my friend Dee. This is Dee on the screen. Dee has some advice for eighth graders as they are writing their application. And here it is on the screen. But basically, Dee is saying, write from your heart. Write something that is personal, that brings you joy, that really shares about yourself. Because when you are authentic in your sharing, one, it's definitely easier to share when you're being authentic, but that it really truly comes out as you. And as a reader of your application, I enjoy learning more about you. We enjoy the different stories that all of you bring to Bay. So really find something that speaks to your heart, and write about that and share that with all of us. All right, here's some advice. Students, Let your parents and guardians or counselor teachers help you, especially for your editing, right? When you're going through it, your grammar, your tone, your spelling, punctuation, again, all of that is important as we're reviewing your applications. But at the end of it, please make sure that it's still your voice and the message is what you want and that it's what's coming through in your application. Definitely, once again, review for errors in grammar, punctuation, and spelling. Very important as you are reviewing your responses toward the end. Make sure that you're looking for any mistakes that you can quickly edit and correct. Again, as Dee said, write about what is important to you and not what you think anyone else wants to read. Because if you do that, one, it makes this task so much more difficult for you. So again, write about what is important to you, not about what you think someone wants to read or know about. When you write authentically and it comes from your heart, this is a much more enjoyable experience. Use anecdotes, right? Use stories that reveal surprising, unique, and positive qualities about yourself. And I think something that's really important that students forget, especially if you wait last minute, make sure you give yourself a couple of days after you've written everything to just kind of walk away for a little bit. Walk away and then come back to it refreshed and then read it. Read it and see, is that still the message that you want to share with the admissions committee? And also, does it feel good? Do you feel good about what you've shared? And then last but not least, as Dee said earlier or shared with all of us, be you. Be you, be authentic, and enjoy talking about your life and sharing yourself with us here at Bay. All right. Here's some base specific advice I want you to know so you feel reassured. Know your audience, the people that are reading your application. You've met us. You have met us, whether you came for a morning visit or for open house, if you attended the theater night or arts night, or if you came to game night and you were playing capture the flag or making hoops out on the courtyard for basketball, or if you tried to dunk me in the tank. You know us, right? These are the people who will be reviewing your applications. I want you to think about those experiences that you've had while you've been visiting Bay this fall. Think about those experiences and kind of reflect upon them, right? What spoke to you during your visit to Bay? What made you smile during the open house event that you attended? Why do you want to be at Bay? One of the things that really helps sometimes is if you just record your thoughts out loud, right? So if you just talk into your phone or into your laptop and just record your thoughts out loud as you're reviewing these questions that we will ask of you. Sometimes just kind of talking it out the first time around will help you organize and think about what you really want to share. Another good piece of advice is to kind of journal this out, write nonstop for a set amount of time that you feel comfortable with. And don't worry about editing your thoughts. Just let it all flow out about why you want to go to the Bay School of San Francisco. Why do you think Bay would be a good fit for you? Which precept speaks to you? Which morning meeting topic would you share with all of us and why? Just go ahead and start journaling and writing about it without worrying about any edits and see what comes out for you. Okay, so those are the pieces that the students and the parents need to prepare, right? So far we've covered parent part one and all of the pieces that go with that. And then we went on and completed the student part two of the application and all of the pieces that the student needs to prepare and submit. Now let's talk about the letters of recommendation that will come from your school. Bay requires 3 letters of recommendation. I need one from your current English or humanities teacher. So one letter has to come from your current English and humanities teacher, right? Then I need another letter from your current math teacher. And then last but not least, a letter from your current principal or head of school or counselor advisor, someone who knows you well there at your middle school. The forms are delegated to these people on Ravenna. So on Ravenna, your parents and guardians will have access to a delegation form, and then they'll be able to email it to your English or humanities teachers, your math teacher, or your counselor advisor at your middle school. Now, All of you know that your applications are due to Bay on January 9th. However, the letters of recommendation are due by the end of January. We know that teachers and schools are so busy during the fall term. So all of the high schools know that as everyone's preparing the documents, it's not until about the end of January that we start receiving the letters of recommendation, which is totally okay. So I don't want you to be worried. We know that this is what happens and it's totally okay. And it actually works in your benefit. By us asking teachers and counselors to turn in letters of recommendation by the end of January, this gives them plenty of time for them to get to know you, right? They've had plenty of time this term to get to know you, and they have until the end of January to go ahead and submit their letters of recommendation. Now, one piece of advice I have for the people who will write your letters of recommendation is to kind of remind them of your moments of awesomeness. It might sound kind of silly, but it's not. It actually really does help. When you are a teacher in charge of so many students, it can easily and understandably, you can forget, right, about certain moments that have happened for a specific student. So if you had a great moment in your humanities class where you know you pushed a discussion forward or had a wonderful project with your team, go ahead and remind your teacher about that moment of awesomeness. So perhaps they will include it in their letter of recommendation about you. In your math class, perhaps you can remind your math teacher about a time perhaps when a unit was extremely difficult for you to grasp, but that you stuck to the tutoring and you came for help outside of class time and you were able to work with the teacher and you were able to understand the material. Remind them of that hard time and how you overcame it, and maybe they'll include it in their letter of recommendation. All right. Transcripts, as you know, will also come from your middle schools. What we're looking for your transcripts is your completed seventh grade year grades or narratives and your first term of eighth grade. Now, just like with the letters of recommendation, we know that we will receive your transcripts by the end of January because of the timing of the school year. And again, students, parents, and guardians, it's okay. We all know that this is the trend and the schedule, and that's fine. So, just wanted to let you know we'll receive this information at the end of January, and that's okay. Now, the admissions committee, when we are looking at transcripts, I want you to know that we're not just looking at grades, right? And we're not just looking specifically at certain narratives. What we are actually considering are trends that we see on your transcript. A transcript tells a story, and that's what we're looking for as we review your transcript. So when you think about what will be included on your transcript, if there's anything on there that you need to explain, please take that time to do that in your application. All right, the student activity list is also a required piece for the Bay School. Now, the activity list, I want you to think of it not as a grocery list of all the things you do every day, every week, and every month of the year. I want you to think of this activity list as a way to tell us how you choose to spend your time. We know that there is never enough time in the day. There is never enough time in the day. It's such a valuable thing. But you choose to spend this value commodity in a certain way. And those are the things we want you to tell us about, right? So on your activity list, tell me what you do in your free time. What do you value? What's important to you? So whether that's the fact that you babysit your younger siblings or that you walk your dog, for over an hour every single day. Perhaps you help the neighbor across the street take out their trash or do yard work for them. Or perhaps you sell the soaps that you create on the weekends. Perhaps you sell those items in Dolores Park. And what about that brings you joy? So whatever it might be that makes you smile and that you choose to spend your time doing, go ahead and share it on that activity list. There is nothing too small to include because everything you do in your free time makes you you. And so we want to know more about it. Okay, now also please remember, having said all of that, it's not about the number of activities on your list. It's not about the number. It's not about the quantity. It's about you sharing what you do in your time with all of us. So that's what we're looking for. In terms of tests for admissions, Bay does not review nor accept standardized test scores for admissions. All right, student conversations. So, student conversations at other schools are also known as the interview. Those of you who have spent time here on our campus, you know that we spent a lot of time together in community. And of course, in community, whether you are in the great room hanging out or doing homework, or if you're standing at the toast bar waiting for your bread to become toast, there are always many, many conversations happening at Bay. So, student conversations at Bay, again, are usually referred to as an interview at other schools. Now, at other schools, you might be asked to submit a recording, you might have a group interview or an activity interview at other schools. Here at Bay, we do one-on-one interviews or conversations with our students. The general purpose of student conversations is to really get a sense of your personality and your interests. We want to make sure that you have the opportunity to ask us any questions that you may have had, but you just haven't had the opportunity to ask someone. So during the interview, that's a great time to do it. We also all look at interviews and conversations as a way to gauge your interest in our schools. And then we are also looking at how you might approach academics, social situations, and community involvement during your conversation and interview. Again, at Bay, we call our interviews student conversations. And what's important to us, just like in any other conversation you have in your life, it's about being authentic and sharing your real interests and thoughts. I want you to keep in mind that there is no right answer when you're having a conversation. You're sharing yourself. So you come to this conversation as your authentic self, and that is perfect and enough. For us here at Bay, we offer both in-person and Zoom options. I want to be clear. Everyone, many people want an in-person interview or conversation here at Bay. If a parent or guardian completes the parent guardian part one, so just part one of the parent application, and they submit it by next Friday, which is Friday, November 15th, we will be able to offer your student an in-person conversation here at Bay if they choose to do so. So again, it is for families who complete parent guardian part one of the application by Friday, November 15th. Your student will have the opportunity to come to Bay for an in-person conversation. If you cannot submit your parent part one guardian application by November 15th, that's okay. We totally understand as long as you turn it in by January 9th, because we'll do Zoom conversations in January. Now, here are possible topics to talk about that come up in conversations here. And now when you look at these prompts, you'll see, again, it's just a conversation. These are things that might come up, but you are really the one leading the conversation. Here's some advice for when you sit and hang out with one of these Bay community members. We want you to elaborate on your answers and to show your thinking, right? So when you respond to a question with your Bay community member, think about how your response really shares who you are, right? We want you to also make connections with your interviewer. It's important that, as you do in any other conversation, you're just connecting, and you are actually building community in that very moment. It's always a good idea to have a few questions prepped. So again, whether these are questions that you have had from your morning visit or from open house, or maybe something you've been wondering about, the time to ask is definitely during your student conversation. And then, of course, feel free to practice lightly if that makes you feel more confident for this experience, because again, it's a conversation. We don't know where it's going to go or how you're going to lead it, but if it makes you feel better and more confident, go ahead and practice lightly. Here's my friend Noah. Noah told me a story of what happened to him during his interview at Bay. And basically, Noah was so nervous. Um, and he had a dry throat and he just started coughing and couldn't stop coughing. And he was so embarrassed. So the more embarrassed he got, the more he started coughing. And he just, it was just a spiral that made him feel so bad. The Bay person took no time, just went ahead, got a cup of water for Noah. And then when Noah was relaxed and felt better and was composed, then they had their conversation. And Noah said that through his 4 years here at Bay, he's never forgotten that kindness. And so I'm telling you this story from Noah, folks, because I want you to know that when you come to Bay, we're here to welcome you and we are people and we just want to get to know you. So there's nothing to be nervous about. All right, so having shared all of that information, I want to give you important dates of what happens next. So, admissions application deadline is on Thursday, January 9th. That is also when flexible tuition applications are due. All admission decisions are released on Friday, March 21st after 4 p.m. And you'll receive your admissions decisions on Ravenna. So please make sure that the email address listed in Ravenna is correct. Revisit week takes place Monday through Thursday after you have all received your decisions, and that is March 24th through the 27th. And in terms of decisions, families' flexible tuition enrollment decisions are due back to Bay by Thursday, March 27th at noon. And families' enrollment decision deadlines are due on Friday, March 28th, also at noon. So these are the deadlines. Now, I want to reemphasize that on Friday, November 15th, if parents and guardians complete Parent Part 1 by next Friday, your student will have the opportunity to come back to Bay to have an in-person conversation with one of our Bay community members. If you do not reach that November 15th deadline, it's totally okay. It just means that your student will interview on Zoom in January. Whew, that was a lot of information, friends. A lot of information. I'm hoping that you're not feeling so stressed or overwhelmed. But if you are, I want you to know the stress isn't always bad. It's not. But I want you to pay attention to yourself and how you're feeling and how you're coping with this stress. It is a competitive process, but try to keep it in perspective. Everything's going to be okay. Now, if you are worried about outcomes, I want you to know that the high school admissions process, it isn't a sorting hat like it is in Harry Potter. I promise. What happens to you in March is not indicative of your destiny at all. What's most important is that you're just present in the moment, that you are here and you're being mindful of what is happening. Show up with your best self, be authentic, and accept that there might be some aspects out of this process that are out of your control, and it's okay. Now, definitely take that opportunity to attend the opportunities for a campus revisit in March. All right, friends, this was a great workshop with all of you, and I want you to know that this is just the beginning of a wonderful experience ahead of you. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to email us here in the admissions office at Bay, and we will be more than happy to help you and walk you through the process. We look forward to meeting you again on campus and to seeing you here at Bay. Take care.